You know, fans, Yankee Stadium has often been the scene of many spine-tingling dramas. But once every year, hands of time are moved back to the dawn of the century, and the spirit of Yankee stars through 50 years take the spotlight. Over 41,000 fans paid a roaring tribute to the Yankees who had written the brightest pages in baseball history. Warming up before the game, we saw Lynn Larry, great shortstop of the middle 30s. And there's Red Ruffing, a pitcher with over 200 wins to his credit, and one of the greatest Yankee right-handers in history. Wilcie Moore was still tall and straight and, well, almost as slim as when his relief jobbing meant so much to the Yankees of Miller Huggins. Looking across the field, we see Wally Pipp, the famous Yankee first sacker, who represent the late Lou Gehrig in today's game. This old-timer should bring back memories. Recognize him? Well, if you don't, he's the one and only Home Run Baker. From left to right, Charlie Keller, Red Rolfe, and Red Ruffing. Ed Barrow, one-time president of the club, is in the center, and on his left is Joe Gordon, Earl Combs, and Lefty Gomez. As the introductions were made, the rafters shook with each memorable name. Frankie Crosetti, now a Yankee coach, and one of the game's greatest shortstops. And behind the plate, who could ever forget the great Bill Dickey? Roger Peckinpah looked as trim and agile as he did while playing his familiar role at short. Who else would be in right field but the old reliable Tommy Henrich? And one of the game's most colorful players, the great fireballing left-hander Vernon Lefty Gomez. Here's the present Yankee shortstop, Bill Rizzuto, one of the greatest at his position in baseball today. Here comes the manager of the all-timers, the great Yankee Clipper, Joe DiMaggio. Washington Senators owner Clark Griffith with his wife receive a standing ovation. The 83-year-old Griffith was the first manager of the Yankees way back in 1903 when they made their bow in the American League. The old fox was also quite a pitcher in those days. Griffith introduced some of his teammates from the 1903 era, a fitting climax to a perfect day spent in Yankee Stadium, the home of champions.
Well, I was happy when I first started. Boy, I like to play 5 years. Then when you get it, I like to play 10. Keep going. I played 17, and I was very fortunate to be in 14 World Series out of 17 years I played. I was one of the lucky guys. You know, you're there with DiMaggio, Charlie Keller, and all them. It was an honor, you know, just to be there.
Yankees, Joe DiMaggio, loved the Yankees. And I started going to Yankee Stadium probably in 1938. I was 9 or 10 years old, and I was always a Yankee fan. I couldn't wait to get the New York News or the Daily Mirror in the morning to see how many hits DiMaggio got. But I was always a Yankee fan.
All the kids from my neighborhood, we were all from Brooklyn. Brooklyn was the #1 team. And then when I first signed with the Yankees, I thought they were going to throw rocks at me and not let me in the neighborhood anymore. I was like a traitor. And then when I was with them, I thought I was going to hyperventilate or something. The first day in camp, I'm sitting between Red Ruffing, Bill Dickey, Joe DiMaggio, Lefty Gomez.
The New York Yankees, the team of the century, the most dominant and winning team in the history of our national pastime. From Babe Ruth to Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, and on through today, the New York Yankees have always been synonymous with championship baseball. Between 1921 and 1964, a span of over 4 decades, the Yankees won nearly 2 out of every 3 American League pennants and 20 World Championships. It is hard to imagine the Yankees not being a winning ball club. Yet in the first 20 years of their existence, The team that would become known as the Yankees won no league championships and finished as high as second only twice. It was an inauspicious beginning for a club that would dominate Major League Baseball in the 20th century. In 1901, the American League began operations. Under the leadership of Ban Johnson, the American League challenged the established National League for the hearts and minds of the American baseball fan. In their first year, the American League had no team in New York, but Ban Johnson knew that for the league to succeed and compete with the National League, they had to have a franchise in the nation's biggest baseball market. In 1903, Ban Johnson outmaneuvered the politically influential New York Giants, who did not want another team in their city, and moved the Baltimore Orioles to the northern end of Manhattan, where they became known as the New York Highlanders. At the time, many New York baseball fans were of Irish descent, and the name Highlanders reminded them of the British Highlander Army Regiment, which had played a large part in suppressing the Irish in their homeland for many generations. As such, for reasons unknown to this day, many of the fans began calling the team the Yankees. The newspapers picked up on the name because it was easier to fit into a headline, and soon thereafter the club officially changed its name to the New York Yankees. During the first 2 decades of the club's history, they won no pennants and were involved in tight pennant races only twice. Despite the presence of great players such as Hall of Famers Wee Willie Keeler and pitcher Jack Chesbrough, the team could not get itself into the postseason. Then in 1914, the team was purchased by 2 very wealthy New Yorkers, Colonel Jacob Rupert and Tillinghast Houston. The 2 men were determined to turn the club into a winner, and they had the financial means to do so. They hired Miller Huggins as the team manager and began purchasing and trading for players to improve the team. In the winter of 1919, at the strong suggestion of manager Huggins, they purchased a young pitcher outfielder from the Boston Red Sox by the name of George Herman Ruth. Few athletes in the history of American sports have dominated a game as Babe Ruth did baseball. To this day, Ruth is still the most legendary and renowned figure baseball has ever known. He was the center of attention on a baseball field for almost 20 years, no matter what he was doing. From the time he first stepped out of the dugout for batting practice, hours before a game was to begin, until the last out in the 9th inning. The crowd was mesmerized by his presence, but Babe Ruth is much more than just a baseball legend. He is, in fact, a major figure in the history of 20th century America. An American treasure, legacy and hero passed on from one generation to the next. George Herman Ruth was born poor and poverty-stricken on the Baltimore waterfront in February of 1895. At age 7, he was put into the St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys on the outskirts of the city. St. Mary's was, for all intents and purposes, a reform school for wayward boys. It was here that young George Ruth learned to love the game of baseball. And even more, excelled at virtually every facet of the game, especially as a left-handed pitcher. At age 16, he was signed to a professional contract by Jack Dunn, who owned the minor league Baltimore Orioles. Within 2 years, Dunn sold Ruth to the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox are one of the best teams in baseball in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, winning the World Series 5 times, with young left-handed pitcher Babe Ruth playing a major role in their 1915, 1916, and 1918 World Championships. When not pitching, Ruth occasionally played the outfield, and at these times, he exhibited remarkable power at the plate. In 1919, Ruth blasted a major league record 29 home runs. Despite their winning ways, all was not right in Boston. Red Sox owner Harry Frazee was a Broadway producer who was always strapped for cash. In the winter of 1919, he needed money to produce a Broadway musical entitled No, No, Nanette. To do this, he sold the young Babe Ruth to the Yankees for a then-record $125,000. The following year, Red Sox general manager Ed Barrow was hired by the Yankees as team president, and he would become the architect of the first great Yankee dynasty. It was Barrow's idea to convert Babe Ruth from a pitcher into a full-time outfielder. Babe Ruth had been an integral part of Boston's 1918 World Championship club, yet from the day Ruth was sold to the Yankees and for the rest of the 20th century, the Red Sox did not win another World Championship. This championship drought has gone down in baseball legend and lore as the curse of the Bambino.
Oh, there's a curse out there. It's a big time. Lori Cabot, the witch, she tried to rescind it one time in '75. She danced on the dugout in Cleveland, and we went out and we won the American League East going away. We were playing about 500. I remember that. She traveled all the way to Cleveland. And then I remember the Red Sox were playing against Toronto to win the American League East. And they had a big seance and they petitioned the body of Babe Ruth. And they brought me down and they brought a bat down. And it was broken and they said, we heal this in the spirit of Babe Ruth and we're going to allow the Red Sox to beat the Toronto team. And they went out and they beat Toronto, won the American League East, and they went to Oakland and lost 4 straight. So you got to know when you have the witches there, you got to know what to ask for. You got to ask for the whole enchilada. Just don't ask for piecemeal things because they only work on, day-to-day basis. So it's out there.
In 1920, the baseball world was sent reeling when it was discovered that 8 members of the 1919 White Sox had conspired with gamblers to throw the World Series to the Cincinnati Reds. Baseball was in danger of losing its status as America's national pastime. Fans across the nation were disillusioned, but in the 1920 season, Babe Ruth blasted a remarkable 54 home runs, absolutely shattering the record of 29 he had hit the year before. News of the 1919 World Series scandal faded into the background as Ruth's awesome display of power captivated America. The Yankees won their first pennants in 1921 and 1922, but lost the World Series both times to rivals the New York Giants. The Yankees and Giants shared the Polo Grounds, and the rivalry between the two teams was intense. In 1923, the Yankees moved into their new home in the Bronx, Yankee Stadium, and won the American League pennant for a 3rd straight year. In the '23 World Series, the Yankees beat the hated New York Giants for their first World Championship. Babe Ruth hit .368 in the series and blasted 3 home runs in a performance that captivated the nation. In his 15 years as a Yankee, Ruth led the team to 7 pennants and 4 World Championships. This Yankee team, led by Ruth and a slugger who joined the team in 1925 named Lou Gehrig, was known the world over as Murderers Row. Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig formed the most powerful 1-2 punch in the history of baseball. Many baseball historians and fans believe the 1927 Yankees were the greatest club ever assembled. In addition to Ruth and Gehrig, the Yanks also had outfielders Earl Combs and Bob Musial, infielders Tony Lazzari, Joe Dugan, and Mark Koenig, and pitchers Wade Hoyt and Herb Pennock. They won 110 games in 1927 and swept an intimidated Pirates team in the World Series. Perhaps in all of baseball history, no single team was as dominant and powerful as were the 1927 Yankees. And it was in 1927 that Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs, a record that stood for over 3 decades. The Yankees won World Championships again in 1928 and 1932. And it was in the 1932 World Series that an aging Babe Ruth wrote another chapter into the history and lore of our national game. As is befitting an American legend and folk hero, Babe's last moment of shining glory in a ball field was an event that may or may not have actually taken place, but one that through the years has become part of the Ruthian mystique. This event, of course, is Babe's legendary called home run off Cub hurler Charlie Root in the 3rd game of the 1932 World Series.
In 1932, Babe Ruth arrives in Chicago to play in his 10th World Series. The Babe is the heavy in a feud between the Yankees and the Cubs. At the train station, angry Chicago fans booed and nearly mobbed him. The squabble is carried into Wrigley Field as the series gets underway. The local fans are out to ride the 40-year-old Ruth, and the Cubs are gunning for him too. But the afternoon will end far differently. After being booed for hitting a home run and for missing a shoestring catch, Ruth comes up in the fifth with fire in his eye. Strike one. Strike two. Then comes the gesture that makes this game historic. Ruth points to deep center field, showing Cub pitcher Charlie Root where the next pitch is going. As the electrified crowd watches, the ball arches into deep right center field. A home run, just where Ruth had pointed. Suddenly, there are no critics in Wrigley Field, and the Cubs are demoralized. Ruth tips his cap to the Cubs bench, and they've seen something that only the Babe, the 100% ball player and showman, can do.
Many baseball historians maintain that Ruth was not pointing to the center field bleachers, but was simply signaling Root that he still had one strike left. Charlie Root himself believed this. Years later, he told reporters that Ruth never pointed to where he was going to hit the ball. If I thought that, the next pitch would have been in his ear. Charlie Root's recollection of the play would seem the most reasonable and logical explanation. However, to his dying day, the Babe maintained that he actually called the homer. What's more, on-deck hitter Lou Gehrig believed the Babe had called his shot. Obviously, the whole truth will never be known, and whatever that truth might be, the called home run will always be remembered as one of the Babe's greatest feats. An aging Ruth was traded by the Yankees to the Boston Braves in 1935, and the Bambino retired later that year. Then, in 1946, Babe Ruth was diagnosed with throat cancer. He died 2 years later in August of 1948. George Herman Babe Ruth will always symbolize the American dream come true. He was just a poor kid from the Baltimore waterfront who grew up to become the most famous and revered American hero of his time, and even more, a lasting and permanent figure in America's history, heritage, and folklore. When the Babe left the Yankees after the 1934 season, the club knew that they would continue to win. Indeed, through the early 1930s, the team's most dominant and best player was not Babe Ruth. It was the man who batted behind him in the order, first baseman Henry Louis Gehrig. Henry Louis Gehrig was born to German immigrant parents in June of 1903 in New York City. He was a dominant athlete in high school and attended Columbia University, where he hit tape-measure home runs as a member of its baseball team. He was signed by the Yankees in 1923, and after 2 seasons in the minor leagues, joined the club for good in 1925. Early in the 1926 season, the Yankees' regular first baseman Wally Pipp complained to manager Miller Huggins that he had a headache and could not play that day. Gehrig was inserted at first base. Over the next 14 years, Lou Gehrig played in a remarkable 2,130 consecutive baseball games, a record that stood for over 5 decades until Cal Ripken Jr. broke it in 1998. Throughout most of his career, Lou Gehrig played in the shadow of Babe Ruth and later on Joe DiMaggio. The shy and introverted Gehrig never complained about his lack of recognition. Rather, he let his performance speak for itself. Lou Gehrig was a phenomenal run producer, blasting 493 lifetime homers and driving in 1,990 runs. During his 17 years with the Yankees, he was a key factor, winning 7 pennants and 6 world championships. With Lou as the major offensive weapon on the team, the Yankees won 3 world championships in a row in 1936, 37, and 38. Even the great Babe Ruth could not claim this accomplishment.
Baseball, like history, repeats itself. 25 years ago, the Giants, led by Bill Terry, left, met the Yankees, managed by Joe McCarthy. Celebrities of the day were on hand. Former President Herbert Hoover, for one. Jimmy Braddock, former heavyweight champion who had lost his crown to Joe Louis, and another champ, Jack Dempsey, were here to cheer. Babe Ruth is sitting this one out after playing in 10 World Series. Famed pitcher Walter Johnson is in the stands, and former New York Mayor Jimmy Walker. Mayor LaGuardia throws out the first ball, and the Giants take on the Yankees as they were to do 25 years later. Lefty Gomez was a Yankee ace who starred under the eagle eye of baseball commissioner Landis. The Giants put their best foot forward with Carl Hubble, but the Yankee power, the murderer's row of Selkirk, DiMaggio, Dickey, and Lazzeri quickly blasted Giant hopes. The Yankee big guns sink the Giants and Hubble as the American Leaguers take the first game. The final game in the Polo Grounds with Mel Ott trying to keep Giant hopes alive with a smashing homer. The Giants need this game for the Yankees lead 3-1. This homer by Ott brings in 2 runs and ties the score, 2-all. Then the Yankee big artillery, led by Lou Gehrig, swings into action. The final blow is delivered by Joe DiMaggio, who lifts a long home run ball to the upper tier, and the New York Yankees are once again world champions.
When Gehrig reported to spring training in 1939 for his 17th season as a Yankee, he couldn't seem to get himself on track. He felt constantly stiff and tired. At 36 years old, many fans and writers attributed Lou's poor performance to his age. Early in the 1939 season, Lou took himself out of the Yankee lineup, and his consecutive game streak ended at 2,130 games. Lou then went to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota for an examination. The results shocked the nation. The Iron Horse was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a disease of the central nervous system. It was a death sentence for Lou Gehrig. In July of 1939, over 60,000 people jammed Yankee Stadium for Lou Gehrig Day. They came to say goodbye to this humble and courageous man. The speech Gehrig gave that day transcends baseball history and has become part of American folklore.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. That I might have been given a bad break, but I've got an awful lot to live for. Thank you.
Lou Gehrig died in 1941, and the fatal condition that caused his death has become known the world over as Lou Gehrig's disease.
Lou Gehrig, his lifetime batting average was .340. Four-time winner of the Most Valuable Player Award, the Iron Horse hit 493 home runs and was the first ball player to play over 2,000 consecutive games. But in 1939, Gehrig was stricken with a rare form of paralysis. Forced to retire from baseball, his fans and teammates gave him a rousing farewell. 2 years later, Lou Gehrig was dead.
On that July day in 1939, when Gehrig said goodbye to America, standing on the sidelines with that current Yankee team was a young star in his 3rd season, a player who was already setting records and astounding the baseball world. A man who would carry on the Yankee dynasty. His name was Joe DiMaggio.
Joe DiMaggio was my hero, without a doubt. I thought he was the greatest thing that God ever put on earth. I knew his middle name, Joseph Paul DiMaggio. I knew his batting averages. I knew everything about Joe DiMaggio. I thought, geez, when I used to play, I used to get a broomstick, and then I would throw stones up and play games, go through the lineup. And when DiMaggio would come up, I would make sure I was going to hit that stone, because I didn't want him to strike out, and I'd throw that stone up and concentrate and hit it a mile, only because it was DiMaggio. When the other guys come up, I'd swing and miss because of not being able to hit it all the time.
DiMaggio, he made the American scene some years before Sinatra in terms of national awareness. And I think that DiMaggio, at least in the way he played the game and the way he conducted himself off the ball field as well as on the ball field, gave Italians in this country much comfort. But Joe DiMaggio also was not a man who stepped out of his role as a private performer very well. He did not, being a man of silence, a man of caution, a man of inward emotion, was not a man that would go out and try to change the world for the Italian-American people. He was not an activist. He was not did not have, without being disrespectful of his achievements, did not have much of a social conscience. If someone called someone a dago, DiMaggio would pretend he didn't hear you. He was not interested in other people's problems. He was a man who did what he did as a genius. He was a genius with a baseball bat. He was a genius as an all-around ball player. But he was not a man who, except for what his performance represented to him and those admirers, those many, many admirers of how he did what he did, he was not a man who was out to change the world. He was really a Sicilian in the sense of being an internal island creation. Don't forget, he came from a fishing community in San Francisco, which had its roots in the villages, the fishing villages of Sicily. And fishermen tend to be individualistic people. They are silent performers.
DiMaggio's streak came to an end in Cleveland in the late summer of 1941.
Most Americans are intimately involved in the war between Germany, Italy on the one hand, and Great Britain and its allies on the other. The bombing in Pearl Harbor made it a global war.
Joe DiMaggio joined the Army and spent 4 years playing Army baseball at outposts around the world. This absence from home caused the end of his first marriage to actress Dorothy Arnold. Arnold was given custody of their only child, Joe DiMaggio Jr. DiMaggio returned to the Yankees in 1946 and led them to world championships in 1947, 49, 50, and 51. In 1949, the team had hired Casey Stengel as their manager. And Stengel had the difficult task of managing DiMaggio as his brilliant career was coming to an end. At one point in the 1951 season, Stengel moved Joe out of the cleanup spot in the lineup and even played DiMaggio at first base for a few games. Finally, at the end of the 1951 season, Joe, unable to perform up to the high standards he set for himself, called it a career.
Yankee Stadium won't be the same picture without that glove and the man behind the glove. Joe DiMaggio announces his retirement after 13 seasons with the Yanks. His bosses, Topping and Webb, and his manager, Casey Stengel, will miss the great center fielder, who said recurring injuries made him decide to quit at 37.
The one thing I remember about him is he never got his uniform dirty. I don't think in his entire career he ever dove for a ball, because most of the time he didn't have to dive for a ball, he was there. He had tremendous instinct on a ball coming off the bat. And in Yankee Stadium, center field is a tough field to play. He was always, seemed like he was always there when the ball was coming down. Never dove for a ball.
This is the first car I ever owned. I call her Cynthia. She's going to have the best care a car ever has. Put Royal Triton in Cynthia's little tummy.
Right, lady.
Cynthia will just love that Royal Triton.
When a well-known honeymoon couple arrives at Tokyo Airport, a throng of 4,000 baseball and movie fans surge out of control, break through police lines. Joe DiMaggio and his bride smile bravely at their greeters, but they don't dare move. So back into the plane they go, while police clear a path to the cargo hatch with DiMaggio's convertible. The stratagem works. The former Yankee slugger and his picture bride escape into the car and head for the safety of their hotel. But their troubles aren't over. Next day comes a press conference where the public was barred, but the photographers and reporters more than made up for that. Their questions were rough, ranging from the risque to the ridiculous. And Joe, he's the forgotten man, which is something in Japan where baseball is so popular. Never underestimate the power of you-know-who. But enough's enough. His patience is exhausted, and Joe says, go.
The couple divorced after only 9 months of marriage.
It was a marriage of two icons. I mean, a film star. I mean, she was just the antithesis of what Joe DiMaggio was. Of course, the great line was when she went over to Korea, I guess it was, and she appeared before the American troops, and she was just cheered beyond belief and all. She came back to Joe, she said, "You never believed the cheering I just heard." Here's a guy who played before 60,000 fans at Yankee Stadium cheering for his every move. But she didn't know, had no idea that he was cheered the same way as she was, that he was respected like she was adored as a movie idol. I don't think it was the greatest marriage. I mean, I think he idolized her. They didn't get along, obviously. But after she died, with the roses bit and all, the fact that he made her funeral, he handled her whole funeral arrangements, even though she'd been married before, and her most recent husband had been Arthur Miller. It was Joe who handled all the funeral arrangements. And it was Joe that made sure that some of the people like Sinatra and some of the Rat Pack didn't show up at the funeral. He let them know in advance he didn't want them at the funeral. He thought that they had demeaned her. He carried himself with class and dignity on the field and off the field. He was a perfect gentleman at all times. He did things on great Yankee teams that he was the leader on some of the greatest teams that ever played the game. He was the leader of those teams. My greatest respect for DiMaggio as a player came after he retired, and I was covering the Yankees for 4 years. And when I saw all those long balls that were at the left center field that were caught in that Grand Canyon out in the old Yankee Stadium, I realized how many more homers he would have had if he were playing in a ballpark with dimensions of every other ballpark. Playing in Yankee Stadium, he must have hit another 40 or 50 balls in his career that would have been home runs in any other ballpark. After he retired, the Dodgers, playing in Ebbets Field, offered him $5,000 and at bat if he would pinch hit. Because Buzzy Bavasi figured if he pinch hit 30 times or 40 times a season for us, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and at Ebbets Field, said he'd hit 30 or 40 home runs. That's how great he was, a right-handed batter.
In all of baseball history, there has perhaps never been a more stylish, smoother, more self-disciplined, and controlled ball player than DiMaggio. His legend goes far beyond the baseball diamond. When Joe passed away in 1999, his death was front-page news around the world. He is without question one of the true giants of the game. There have been millions of words written about him, even songs written about him, and many of those who saw him play in his prime are convinced that he was perhaps the greatest ball player ever to walk on a big league field.
He was probably a perfect teammate. He didn't care about anything else but winning. He didn't care about his home runs. He only cared if his hits or home runs won a game. Otherwise, it didn't make any difference to him. If it was a losing event, he was just as upset as if he won 0 for 4. It's incredible. So he would be your classic teammate. In fact, I have a poster at home when they had his monument, and his poster said that, a great teammate. That's what he wanted to be remembered as. He didn't care about anything else. People, he could not understand why people idolized him so much. And he was a very shy guy, but a very nice, generous man, too. When we were rookies, he would take us under his wing. He wouldn't let us pay for anything. He was a great guy.
Mickey was the best teammate you could ever have. He never got on anybody. He never had a derogatory remark to anybody. See? And, a couple of times, some of the guys, including me, things weren't going right. Like I'm 0 for 20. That'll keep you awake at night. But you go to your locker and you're thinking, oh man, what am I doing wrong? What am I dipping my shoulder? But am I lunging at the ball? I got to stay back. You're thinking all these, not negative, but you're thinking too much. And pretty soon somebody would tap you on the shoulder. You'd look up and as Mickey say, hey, he said, you come with me tonight. So all he'd do is say, okay. When number 7 said, you're going with me tonight, you'd cancel out everything you planned and go with him, see? And then you'd go down town and he'd get you a big steak and just converse back and forth. Why, by gosh, after the evening was over, you couldn't wait to get to the ballpark the next day. I don't know what it was. And you seemed to get your base hits to get you going, see? And he was just that way. I can't say enough about him. He was number one.
Casey Stengel took over as the Yankee skipper in 1949 and then led the club to an unprecedented 5 straight World Championships in 1949, 50, 51, 52, and 53. In the first 3 of those championships, Joe DiMaggio was the marquee Yankee star. But in 1951, a new star emerged. He would take DiMaggio's place in center field and lead the Yankees to 12 pennants and 7 World Championships. His name was Mickey Mantle, and he was a phenom.
The world champion New York Yankees are once more making a determined drive toward the coveted American League pennant. And here are some of the reasons why. Jolton Joe DiMaggio, shown here blasting a homer, had been sidelined with injuries. Now that he's back in the lineup, he's one very good reason why the Bronx Bombers are tops in the American League circuit. Jackie Jensen, the California speedster, is considered by many as the most improved player in the league, and his big bat has already produced 5 big home runs. Mickey Mantle, another of the Yanks' fabulous rookies, looks like a fixture in the outfield. Mickey hits equally well from either side of the plate, and his speed, well, Tom Greenway, Yankee scout, clocked both Mantle and Jethro after each had tripled. Mantle wound up on third in less than 6 seconds, while Jethro was slightly over the 6-second mark.
He's dangerous right-handed, friend. He's rough. If he was ever a right-handed hitter, you know, just plain right-handed, he was strong right-handed. You know, he grew up, his dad made him a switch hitter, and heck, he could hit him just as long for left-handed too, as far as that goes, but right-handed, boy.
Mickey Charles Mantle was born in Spavinaw, Oklahoma in October of 1931. His father, Mutt Mantle, named him after Mickey Cochran, the great Hall of Fame catcher. He also taught his young son how to switch hit. A phenomenal player as a youth, Mantle was signed by the Yankees in 1950. He joined the big league team in 1951, Joe DiMaggio's last season. Although there are many pictures of the two stars together, their relationship was cool at best. Mantle got off to a horrible start in 1951, and Stengel sent him back to the minors. Mantle, at 19 years old, was ready to quit baseball. Mickey's father came from Oklahoma to Kansas City to see his son. When Mutt Mantle arrived, Mickey thought he was going to get a pep talk. Instead, Mutt Mantle began packing Mickey's clothes and told him that if he wanted to quit baseball, he could come back to Oklahoma and work in the mines. Mickey began hitting again shortly thereafter and was called back up to the Yankees. It was midsummer of 1951, and it was the beginning of a golden age in New York baseball history. The New York Yankees, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the New York Giants were all among the best teams in baseball. The center fielders on all 3 teams became the symbols of New York's baseball dominance. Mickey Mantle of the Yankees, Duke Snider of the Dodgers, and Willie Mays of the Giants. In the 12 World Series played between 1947 and 1958, 6 of these pitted the Yankees against the Dodgers, 1 featured the Yankees versus the Giants, and overall 11 of the 12 included at least one of the New York teams. The Yankees, led by Mantle and with stars such as Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford, Vic Raschi, Allie Reynolds, and Phil Rizzuto, dominated the Subway Series, beating the Brooklyn Dodgers 5 times and the Giants once. They also beat the Phillies and Braves in series play for a total of 7 World Championships in a 12-year period.
Yankee Stadium for the 5th game with the Yanks and Dodgers tied up 2 games apiece. A pivotal game. Sal Magley is going for his 2nd victory for Brooklyn. Mickey Mantle steps in. Going, a home run for the Yankees' great slugger. His 3rd in this year's Fall Classic. First hit off Magley and the first run of the game. The way things turned out, Mickey's blast was enough, though the Yanks did score again in the 6th. Spine-tingling catches thrilled the onlookers. Yogi Berra hits one, and Duke Snider races in for a tumbling catch to electrify the 65,000 fans in the stadium. And more thrills were to follow. Not a Dodger had reached first base off Don Larson, the big right-hander from California, who'd been taken out in the second inning of the second game. One down in the fifth, Larson faces Gil Hodges. Hodges powers one towards left center, but Mantle sprints over for the catch. Mickey saves the day. Larson continues his mastery of the Dodgers. 2 out in the ninth, still not a hit. Dale Mitchell is pinch hitting for Magley. He stands between Larson and a perfect game. The tension in the stands is terrific. Here it comes. He strikes him out. The Yanks win a key game 2-0, and Don Larson is baseball's man of the hour. He pitched the first no-hitter in a World Series and the second perfect game in the history of the major leagues.
Larson had anything I put down, Fran, he got it over. It was just amazing. He went to 3 ball and 1 hitter. That was the Pee Wee Reese. The 1 hitter, 3 balls only. And the rest of anything he put down never shook me off.
The world champion New York Yankees spring into action to prepare the defense of their crown. Manager Casey Stengel won with what he had last year and expects to field a stronger club in 1957. Mr. Everything in 1956, Mickey Mantle, looks as though he's in for another banner year. Maybe this is the year he'll topple Ruth's record. Teaming up with Mantle in the outfield is hustling Hank Bauer. Yogi Berra, the incomparable bomber backstop, still looks indestructible. Versatile Gil McDougall is set to play anywhere Stengel suggests, but he should see more action at shortstop. Andy Carey will have a battle on his hands to win the hot corner spot, and if his hitting improves, he might make it. One of the best rookies in camp is shortstop Jerry Lump, up from Richmond. Fiery Billy Martin should receive some stiff competition for the second base spot, but will probably be on the Keystone sack on opening day. Don Larson gives the Yankee mound corps a big lift. His no wind-up style will probably have plenty of imitators. Whitey Ford is looking forward to another great year, and the Yankees look as though they are headed for another pennant-winning campaign. To see how another pitcher, Bob Turley, feels about the Yankee chances, let's listen in as he talks with Jim Leeming.
When you were traded from Baltimore to the New York Yankees, I'm certain that everybody who puts on that Yankee uniform is thrilled about it, and it seems to do something for them. Do you feel that it has done anything for you mentally?
Yes, it has, Jim. It's got me in the habit of playing on a winning ball club and playing like a winning ball player. It's something that comes from the last place ball club where you're out of the race by June the 1st and then be with the ball club that's in there all the way, and you get in the habit of playing winning baseball and thinking winning baseball all the time.
After the Dodgers and Giants moved to the West Coast, the Yankees, now New York's only big league team, continued to dominate the game. They won pennants in 1957, 58, 60, 61, 62, 63, and 64, and took the world title 4 times. They lost to the Pirates in the 1960 series when Bill Mazeroski hit a home run in the bottom of the 9th in the 7th game. Casey Stengel was forced to resign as Yankee skipper after the 60 season, and Ralph Houck took his place. In 1960, a young outfielder named Roger Maris joined the club and had an MVP year.
Roger, your bat has helped the Yankees move into first place this year. How do you feel about being with the first place New York Yankees?
Well, Bob, it feels real good, I'd say, after playing on, well, a couple of second division ball clubs for the last 3 years. To be up with a ball club that's got possibilities of a pennant, it feels real good.
Do you think the Yanks can go all the way this year, Roger?
Well, I think we can. We have a good hitting lineup, and we should, by rights, score enough runs to win the majority of our ball games. It leaves it up to the pitching staff from there, and if they come through, I think we will win this pennant.
Well, how about the home run situation, Roger? You're 7 games ahead of Babe Ruth's record. Do you think that you can beat the Babe's record?
Well, I don't think so, Bob. Of course, I'm not going to shoot for it. Babe had a real hot month in the month of September, He hit, I think, 17 home runs, and that's quite a feat in itself, and I don't think I can break it.
I guess the main thing on your mind is winning that pennant. Isn't that right, Roger?
Winning the pennant and doing the best I can.
Thank you very much, Roger Maris, outfielder, New York Yankees.
Mantle and Maris formed a power duo in the middle of the Yankee lineup, almost as potent as the duo of Ruth and Gehrig. In 1961, the two sluggers staged a remarkable display of power as both made a charge at Babe Ruth's record of 60 home runs in a season. Mantle was injured late in the year, but Maris continued his assault on the Babe's record. Maris was a quiet and sensitive man, and the publicity surrounding his chase of the Babe caused him unbearable strain and anxiety.
Roger in 61 was, he did go through hell on the field and, off the field really, with the press. The press crucified him. Roger Maris is the most underrated baseball player I have ever seen in my life. He was a tremendous outfielder. He really was, but his offense took over. And all they were talking about was home runs, which is fine. But let's not forget about the defense he could play. He could run like a deer, he could throw with the best of them, and he could field the ball. He could go get the ball, see? But they never thought about that. They always thought about the home runs, see? Roger's a tremendous ball player, again, a super guy, individual.
Roger was a good ball player, friend. He could do everything, run, throw, and hit. And that's no lie. He could do all of that.
On October 3rd, the last day of the 1961 season, Maris was tied with Ruth at 60 homers. Facing Red Sox right-hander Tracy Stallard, Maris launched a shot into the right field stands at Yankee Stadium for his 61st home run. This record stood for over 3 decades until Mark McGwire broke it in 1998.
Crowd in Yankee Stadium for the final game of the year is here to cheer not the Yankees, but Roger Maris, who comes through with his 61st homer for a new baseball record. It's a qualified record, however. Babe Ruth set his 1927 record of 60 homers in a shorter season of 154 games. And it took Roger 4 more games to hit 60 and 162 games to hit 61. The baseball commissioner has ruled that Ruth's record stands until someone hits 61 in the same number of games. That ruling does nothing to dull the roar of the crowd today. They won't let Roger alone until he comes out of the dugout and takes a bow. The newest Sultan of SWAT, Roger has set a record that will probably stand for many years.
Gosh, I know after the game, Mrs. Babe Ruth was in the stands at the time, and she came down by the Yankee clubhouse underneath the stands, and I walked out there and saw her, and she had big tears coming down. Well, that did it for me, and me and a lot of other Yankee ball players. Everybody had tears coming down, see, and I think Roger did too. He might have held it up while he was talking with her outside the door, but when he came in the door, the water was coming down, And I guess everybody said to him, what was the conversation all about? And what it amounted to was she congratulated him, Mrs. Ruth congratulated Roger, and then Roger assured her, he said, Mrs. Ruth, he said, there'll never, ever be another Babe Ruth. He was the greatest. Boy, that sent goosebumps big time.
Number one, he was probably the best ball player for a year or so that I was ever around. In fairness to Mickey was probably the most talented, and I wasn't there when Mickey was at his outstanding best when he won the Triple Crown and so forth. But Roger was as great a guy as he was a ball player. Just everybody in the clubhouse loved him, interacted with him, and he was just straightforward. What you see is what you got, and he was there for you, on and off the field for that matter. So, and he left a hell of a legacy. He's got great kids down in Florida. I know them all and play golf with them, and I guess you know, finally, just kind of like what Mickey has left. You know, Mickey had, you know, the alcohol problem himself, and they readily admit, but his whole family is sober, and before he departed us, why, that was his legacy. And Roger, on the other hand, I think left straightforwardness and honesty with his kids, and you know, that's a great story. You know, in spite of all the adversity that you hear in both cases. Today, everything is just great, you know. When you consider we're not going to be here forever, you got to leave something.
Although the Yankees won the World Series in 1961 and 62, the team was in decline. Mickey Mantle, the heart and soul of the Yankees, was wearing down. Throughout his career, the chronic injuries to his legs caused him tremendous pain. And playing every day as he did took enormous courage.
You know, I'd ask him on a couple of occasions, geez, why don't you, designated hitter will be coming in pretty soon, why don't you stay around, you can do that. He said that to me, I can't do that and play the way I'm playing. They would throw that ball down into his knees, the pitchers, you know, and really back him off the plate, and which was part of the game at that time. He didn't charge out to the mound like they do today, but it was a real treat just to see the way he conducted himself, the way he handled himself, the way the media talked to him, and the way everybody made a fuss over him. I mean, it was amazing, and those are the kind of things that stick in your mind while you're playing and throughout your career.
You know, he wrapped the leg from calf to hip, and Mickey had it on all game, and then sometimes in a doubleheader, and in order to get the support you wanted out of it, it killed the circulation. So yeah, it was a painful thing. You bet it was, and you know, when he hit from the left side, when he came forward on that right knee, that was so bad. You know, you knew he was in a lot of pain.
In 1963, the Yankees won the pennant but was swept in the series by the Los Angeles Dodgers. It was the first time in their long and glorious history that the Bronx Bombers were swept in a World Series. In 1964, the Yankees, now managed by Yogi Berra, got off to a poor start. At midseason, it looked as if they had no shot at the pennant. But then an incident took place involving a young infielder named Phil Linz that somehow galvanized the team.
Well, very simply, we had just lost 4 straight games in Chicago in a hot pennant race. And we thought we were out of the race. Then it was late in August, so it looked like we got knocked out of the race. And we were on a team bus, and everybody was very quiet and sober. And I had just bought a harmonica the day before, and I was just learning how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I started playing some notes, and somebody down in front called out, "Shove that harmonica."
Well, we lost 3 one-run games in Chicago, and I just told him to shove that thing.
And I go, "I was at Yogi." I said, "What did he say?" And I turned to Mickey Mantle, and Mickey said, "He said play it louder." So I continued to play, and what happened is Yogi came running back, and I put the harmonica at him, and he threw it at me. We had a big verbal argument back and forth, and I was, "What are you getting on me? I'm giving 100%. You know, we were all upset, man. So the next day I apologized to Yogi's. And it was in headlines all over the country. It was like war headlines. It knocked Vietnam off the front page. It was like this, the incredible, like World War III. So that night I went to Yogi's office, and we were in Boston, and I apologized. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I don't know what.
And it happened, and we started winning after that.
And then a few days later, a Horner Harmonica Company called me, and they offered me $10,000 to endorse their harmonica, and that was as much as my salary was that whole year. It was you know, it was incredible. So I was on the back of the Yankee yearbook with my Yankee uniform on in '65, with my harmonica in my uniform, saying, "Play it again, Phil."
The Yankees went on to win the pennant in 1964, but lost to the Cardinals in the World Series. The 1964 pennant was the last league title the Yankees would win for 11 long years. Mickey Mantle retired from baseball in 1969. In the early 70s, a shipbuilder from Cleveland named George Steinbrenner bought the Yankees. He was determined to bring glory back to the franchise. In 1976, the Yankees won the pennant but lost the series to the Reds. In 1977 and 1978, the Yankees won back-to-back world championships. These teams featured the remarkable Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. The heart and soul of the 77 and 78 world championship teams, however, was their captain and catcher, Thurman Munson.
I got to tell you a story about Thurman. The first time I ever saw him, I was playing for the Senators, and the Yankees had brought him up towards the end of the year. And I remember asking a couple of my teammates, I says, who is that cocky little sucker catching there? And they says, well, you should know him. I said, why should I know him? And they says, he comes from your part of the area, you know, the country. And I said, where's he from? And he said, Canton, Ohio. My hometown is East Liverpool, Ohio, and they're about 50 miles apart. And I said, well, what's his name? He says, Thurman Munson. I said, I've never heard of him. So I go up to the plate, and I look down at him, and I says, I understand your name. I says, I bet you think that name Thurman's unusual. And he looked up, and he says, yes. I said, it's not to me. I said, I have a dad by that name and a brother by that name. And then I stepped in the box, and I says, I hear you're from Canton, Ohio. And he says, yes. I said, don't mess with me, kid. I'm from East Liverpool. And he didn't know what to even say to me. And then the following spring, we ended up being teammates. And we always got along real great, I guess because of, I don't know, I was a veteran. And I'd get on Thurman and kid around with him a lot. And he would take a lot of things that I'd say to him. And he wouldn't take it from a lot of other ball players. But I guess because we was from the same area and I was a veteran and he was more or less a rookie, he took it from me. I don't know why.
After the 78 title, there was another world championship drought. The Yankees won the pennant in 1981, but lost the series to the Dodgers. As the 90s began, things didn't look much better for the Yankees. But then Joe Torre was hired as manager, and with a core of new young stars, the Yankees came to dominate the game again, winning world championships in 1996, 1998, and 1999. They ended the 20th century by once again reigning on top of the baseball world. Of the 96 World Series played in the 20th century, the Yankees won 25 of them, an unprecedented and remarkable feat. In the entire history of American sports, no team has even approached the consistent excellence of the New York Yankees. They are, without question, the team of the century.